Hello everyone, as you can probably tell from the thumbnail, title, and whatever wacky description I give this, we're going to be talking about a special character in the Spider-Man mythos, one who's had her ups, her downs, and yeah. And joining me for such a controversial character, kind of beloved in some senses, the one and only Smugstick.
Hello everyone, I am very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No time. It's very rare I get people who want to talk Spider-Man with me. Surprisingly. But yeah, Gwen Stacy, I guess I just want to ask you straight away, because when we've talked off air, you've told me how much of a fan you are of the character. What was your first exposure to Gwen?
Gwen, well actually, when movies were first coming out and the third one came out, I had a magazine describing all the quote-unquote errors of the Spider-Man movies, and back then I didn't know that this was just an adaptation and whatever. So I read that Gwen was actually one of Spider-Man's first girlfriends right before the Spider-Man 3 came out. I was like, this is really cool, I didn't know about this, and I started to hate MJ ever since then until I grew up and I realized that she's just another character. But I heard of Gwen and I started to research more about her, and I was like, an awesome character, honestly. And I've kind of got a thing for blondes now. But
this is the real reason. He just exposed himself like 5 minutes in. But yeah, no, I can totally see. She was a character, like, especially early on, where she was in Spider-Man comics for like a relatively short period of time, at least compared to like Mary Jane or someone. So when people were adapting like the early Spider-Man stuff, they never really went to Gwen because they felt like, oh, we're going to streamline things, we'll just jump straight to Mary Jane. She's the popular one everyone knows. So at least that's Amy's logic. But knowing that you like had that growing appreciation for Gwen straight away, that makes me happy, because I do think she is an undervalued character. A lot of people kind of, especially I want to stick to 616 Gwen, at least for the moment, which for anyone unaware, that's like the main timeline Gwen. A lot of people call her boring or really throw some comments at her, which I think a lot of like nice characters get. Like, for some reason, just being nice means people will like hate on you ridiculously because you're not interesting.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I've always been drawn to the nicer characters, the more good guys. Like, for example, I'm a big fan of Dragon Ball, and like everybody always compares Goku and Vegeta. I'm always going for Goku. I always like the nicer characters. And although Mary Jane is super nice, she's also a party girl, and that does make her more exciting in the eyes of the reader. And I get why they ended up going with her after all. Make just Peter's relationships more exciting. But Gwen, she's such a pure figure in the Marvel universe. At least during the point of her writing originally, before her death, she just represented something very innocent about Peter Parker. And I think that's what made her really special, in my opinion.
I think that's a really good point, is the innocence idea. Is obviously back then it was simpler times. Like when Stan Lee was writing women, he wasn't exactly writing the best representations of how women actually were. But I do think Gwen was, at least initially, more of a better example of that, because for one, she was the first character who would call Peter out on his bullshit. We like to say Gwen is nice, but that's because originally Peter was pretty much an asshole. She was the first one in his social group, like unlike Flash, who would just bully him. So like Peter could like wave away, say, oh, I don't have to be nice to Flash because he's a bully too. Whenever he would have to ditch Gwen, or whenever Spider-Man would take priority over his socialite, and then Gwen called him out, he didn't have an argument anymore, because this wasn't an asshole being an asshole back. This was a genuinely nice girl that he was like breaking her heart because he didn't know how to sort his priorities right, which again is a very relatable thing for a character at their age, is especially if you had superpowers. Like, fuck, I can't get my schedule right as it is.
Man, I think that the thing that's probably But yeah, you're right. She totally called him out. He was every time he didn't have a refutal.
And obviously the elephant in the room is this all led to Stan Lee. Well, first Stan Lee's original plan was, although Mary Jane sold more, and Mary Jane was the more popular character because, like you mentioned earlier, she had the party girl figure. John Romita Jr. drew her, like he drew Gwen and then Mary Jane very similarly, but Mary Jane always wore the more like provocative clothing or like had the more hip lines. If you read any of those 60s dialogue, it's the funniest thing how Mary Jane talks. She's always calling him like Daddy-O and shit. It's really, really funny in retrospect how like Mary Jane sounds like an alien. But apparently at the time that was just more seen as like the more youthful, energetic character. But Stan Lee still, despite that, always planned for Peter to marry Jane and Peter to marry Gwen. That was going to be his Lois Lane. And then when Stan Lee left the book and a guy called Jerry Conway took over, he decided that Gwen just wasn't... The Spider-Man books at that time needed like a push. And he felt that Gwen, out of all the cast characters, was the one who made Spider-Man's life easier rather than more difficult. So, for example, everyone knows like Aunt May gets sick like 24/7. Like this woman has no healthcare. Or Harry Osborn at the time was during a drug addiction. Mary Jane was dealing with that, and her party girl persona like hides her troubled past. And everyone else in Spider-Man has a lot of fucking baggage. And Gwen had some baggage too because her father, George Stacy, had died in prior issues, but she was still nice to Peter. She may have had a thing against Spider-Man, but no matter what happened, she would always still put faith in Peter. So, because they needed drama, that put her on the chopping block. So, what do you think about that move, Luis? Luis? This is the problem of recording for the first time. It just shows how much of an asshole I am. Do you have any preferences on the death of Gwen Stacy? Did you think it needed to happen? Do you think it should have happened, or?
Well, I don't know if it needed to happen, but I do get what all the decisions that led to this came about and why everything was going on. And I agree to some degree that she was probably the leader in Peter's life at that point, but I don't know. I can't think of a world without the death of Gwen Stacy, since it's such a landmark comic moment. You know?
Yeah, 100%. It like we talked about the innocence of Peter Parker, and you made a good point there because Gwen's when he lost his innocence. Like if Uncle Ben's what like got him on the road to being Spider-Man, the death of Gwen is when he's like fully Spider-Man now, where he's because Uncle Ben's death wasn't like a light switch moment. Like Uncle Ben's death just got him on the road to thinking of helping people. But a lot of the time in his early issues, he was still only out for money or something. He wasn't doing it really out of being a hero. Over the years, he did become a hero, but Gwen was really his first, okay, you need to take this seriously because you made this mistake and it cost this girl her life when you thought you could catch her with the web, which is such a heartbreaking moment. Like many superheroes have a death where like a villain will kill them, but I think Gwen remains unique in that it's Peter's web that snaps her neck.
Yeah, I remember the first time I read that issue, and it's such a shock to me, because it was, I want to say it was right before the Amazing Spider-Man 1 came out, and I was catching up on some Gwen story, and I knew it happened. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, and when I saw it happen, I was just staring at the page for a solid minute, and I was like, I can't believe I just watched that happening. I knew it was coming up. I didn't know it was, at this point, I didn't know it was against the Green Goblin. I didn't know it was Peter's own web that did that. And I was putting myself in his place. I could not live with myself if I did that. It was my own fault that I put this girl in danger. It's crazy.
It's one of those things where it's many people have argued like, oh, DC likes to reboot their characters a lot. Like Superman will get rebooted like every 10, 20 years. But like Marvel hasn't done that. Marvel has had giant events, but it's still the same canon. Like Spider-Man's still the same timeline as when Stan Lee first wrote him. So people have been always saying, oh, when you do reboots of Spider-Man, what would you keep, what would you change? The death of Gwen Stacy is something that's always there. She's just as pivotal as like a landmark moment as Uncle Ben's death, which is crazy.
Wow. I didn't. You would say. I do think, like, of course you can't do Spider-Man without Uncle Ben, although I guess the MCU kind of disagrees, but.
But even then, he's implied there.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, wow. I'm genuinely surprised by this right now.
Yeah, like for example, even Spectacular Spider-Man, beloved series, they were planning in some direct. If they didn't get cancelled, they were going to do 2 more seasons, and then they were going to do direct-to-video movies where they could do like more like adult-themed stuff because it wasn't on for kids. And the death of Gwen was planned for that, which is crazy.
That's awesome. The Spectacular Spider-Man is it's already a really well-made series and very faithful to the spirit of those of that era of Spider-Man. So seeing that, and that Gwen specifically, who's like even a little better, I'd say, than the original comic one in my opinion, just because I'm a big fan of the Ultimate Spider-Man universe, and she reminds me of Jane in the Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, where she's like the nerdy girlfriend.
I think that's really cool.
But like, I guess, yeah, so Gwen for the longest time was just seen as this character like Uncle Ben, like Batman's parents, or even Jason Todd. They're dead, and they're most known for their death. Even though they could have been a good character up to that point, the public just knows them for their death. However, recently, that's all changed, because Gwen's made a comeback in a very strange, very unique, big way that I think you might be excited to talk about.
Just a little bit.
Just a tad.
This is one of my favorite things about the Marvel Universe right now.
So, I kind of want you to set the scene for people who don't fully know, but so the story of Spider-Gwen, or as she's known now, Ghost Spider, is a bit different than how Peter Parker's story normally goes.
Yes, it's just a tad. Well, actually, Gwen in this universe, this was introduced during the Spider-Verse event, which was massive, spanning many different spider people through different universes coming together to fight this one big nemesis. But that's besides the point. Spider-Gwen, she's the one bitten by the radioactive spider in this universe. And meanwhile, Peter Parker turns himself into the Lizard because he wants to be a hero, like Gwen is in this universe. Sadly, it doesn't go down well, and Gwen has to kill, or inadvertently kills, to stop the Lizard. It's a very sad moment, it's a very sad issue, but it made Gwen into something completely different. This Gwen is completely different from the one we usually know. She's younger, she's spunkier, she's a drummer, and she made her a very, very interesting character, and she's gotten plenty of her own issues and series by now, and it's wonderful.
Like, she was initially meant to just be a one-shot character from a special. Like, what would happen if Gwen Stacy was SpiderWoman? And she blew up. Like, it's one of those things where the creators had no intention of continuing it, but people really loved it, and I think a lot of it has to do. I'm not even gonna run around the bush here. Spider-Gwen has one of the coolest costumes in comics. Like, yeah. Holy fuck. Like, that is such a good design.
Exactly. I've always been such a fan of hooded designs, like Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly's little hoodie thing is super cool. And just Spider-Gwen, seeing her with the hood on, stalking you in the shadows, but it's striking white and pink and blues. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the art style of that comic specifically. That set everything off.
Yeah, I'm gonna post some panels just so you guys can see, but it's one of those comics where it really does feel like a different universe than the Marvel universe. And I wanna establish this because there's gonna be a big change happening recently that we're gonna get into. But like we said, Gwen's story is set on a different Earth, and I think that's interesting because you can play with that. One of her biggest villains, if not her biggest villain, is Daredevil, who in this universe is the Kingpin.
Yeah, it's really weird to see Matt Murdock in such a different position than we him. He doesn't even have a costume or anything. He's just the man with a staff. He is basically the Kingpin for real. And there's a lot of changes in the, like he said, the colors represent that very well. For example, this universe is so weird. Like Captain America, woman. There's, oh god, I can't even think of many right now. I know there's a bunch, but that's the main one that I can think of. Daredevil and Captain America.
Also, like the Punisher's like a cop.
Yeah.
Which is just like, of course he would be. This is just a regular American cop at this point. But yeah, it's one of those universes where the joy of reading Spider-Gwen, and I'd highly recommend the original series to everyone, is not really just on Gwen. Her universe is so unique, and I feel like something she really nailed, because the best Spider-Man is a character where recently he's had a lot of like spin-offs, would you say?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got your Miles, you got your 2099, you've got your Scarlet Spider, you got your Superior Spider-Man. There's a lot of people with the similar powers and abilities to Peter, and I feel like what made Gwen one of the biggest successes is she wasn't trying to copy him. She had her own villains, she had her own story, she had her own personality, and it really made her feel like she belonged. Whereas until Spider-Verse, I did feel like Miles didn't really do much outside of Peter. Or even the biggest example, as cool as his costume is, Ben Reilly is a literal clone of Peter Parker. Like, you can't get any more obvious than, oh, this is just a Spider-Man clone. He literally is.
Exactly. I mean, nowadays, Ben, and I don't know what's going on with him. I try to read some of his recent Scarlet Spider issues. It's really weird stuff that's going on there.
And I feel like Gwen for the longest time was good in her own little pocket universe, which they did to great effect in her film debut, the Spider-Verse Gwen, which she's a little different than the main comic just in terms of how she interacts with friends and stuff, but in terms of adaptation, she's pretty much spot on.
Yeah, exactly. She looks a little different too. Her hair's different, but I mean that's explained in the movie.
Yeah,
but
Miles fucked that up.
Yeah. That scene was super funny. But yeah, like you said, you know, a lot of these characters, they looked up to Peter, or they knew about Peter prior. Like, you know, Miles took up the mantle from Ultimate Spider-Man 2099. You know, he becomes Spider-Man in the future of the Spider-Man Earth, in an Earth where Spider-Man was there before. But Gwen is the original spider person of her own universe. So I think that makes her super cool and super special. And I think it's exemplified even more by the fact she names herself Spider-Woman. Nothing different, you know. Like there's a bunch of in the Marvel universe, but this is the Spider-Woman of her universe, the main spider person.
It's very much just like me and you both do. It's a what if. It's not meant to impact the main universe. It's meant to just explore a different take. And I feel like Marvel obviously kind of made that term popular with their series, and Gwen's one of the biggest recent examples that I feel like was the best way to bring her back without bringing her back, if you get what I mean. Because I feel like Gwen Stacy's death is so important that although we still like Gwen and modern writers want to write her, it would feel really weird to bring her back.
Exactly. I don't think it will be appropriate either. I know they've tried to a couple of times. I know there was a clone, there was some other stuff, but I think bringing her from a different universe is probably the best way to reintroduce the character, especially like, say whatever you want about the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but it did bring the character of Gwen Stacy to light a little bit more. And I know a lot of people, especially teenagers and younger people that grew up watching those specific movies, it's really And coincidentally, that was around Spider-Verse was about to happen too. So
I definitely think that's a good point to bring up just quickly, is the live action Gwen. I thought Emma Stone did a really fantastic job, and especially compared to, again, controversial or what, I don't really care. Kirsten Dunst's MJ she was always the weakest part of those movies to me, but Emma Stone was one of the strongest parts of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and she really, I think for a lot of people who only watch films, made a lot of them just like Gwen more than Mary Jane.
Yeah, exactly. I agree completely with the stuff you said about Kirsten Dunst. I was the Amazing Spider-Man movies were coming out, and I related to a lot of the stuff that Peter was going through in those movies, specifically more so than the comics. For example, because I don't know, especially the 60s comics, they don't quite reflect anymore what normal high school teenagers necessarily go through. So,
which
you
is
know
why
what I
they
mean?
did
Like,
that.
exactly. That's why also Ultimate Spider-Man was one of my favorite ones growing up. And first, like, I asked out my girlfriend the exact same way Peter did in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, so it was super awkward and lame, but I related to those movies, and that's why I like them a lot. But that's besides.
Can I get a dar in the comments, folks? No, that's fantastic. I think that's one of the strengths of Spider-Man, and one of the strengths of Gwen is it doesn't matter. Like, so many people like to complain about genders or such, but I feel like Gwen is something people should like universally. She's not trying to replace Peter Parker or anything. She's a really good example of just allowing a female character to have her own universe and kick ass in it, and like show, like, beat up Daredevil and be what Peter Parker is to the Marvel universe in her own place. However, I feel like I'm worried for the character because I feel like she's starting to be shoved off as like a side character for a recent change that's happening.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if I agree with what Marvel's doing with her right now with Earth 616.
Yeah, so this comic hasn't come out yet, so this could all just be speculation, and that's why I'm leaving it to the very end of the video, because I don't want to hate on writers, artists, or corruption without really knowing the thing. But just from what's been said, I'm already hesitant just on principle alone, because we're moving Gwen Stacy out of her own universe into the main universe, which previously happened with Miles Morales. And this means there's yet another Spider-Person in the main universe with Peter, and I don't know, I feel it's really weird for Peter Parker to have to interact with his dead girlfriend, technically.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's quite right to do it. Like we said, Spider-Gwen is supposed to be an opportunity for the writers to write about Gwen in a different universe without affecting anybody else in the regular universe. And Peter already has so many spider people, you know, there's Silk, there's Miles, I don't know, is Ben Reilly still running around?
Yeah, so's Kane.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right, Kane. I don't know, Jessica Drew.
It's just, you named 50,000 of them, literally, and it's crazy. It's one of those things where I can understand the appeal. I think all of them are, like, individually really cool characters. It's just when you put them all together, it gets a bit much.
Exactly. It seems like Spider-Verse was a bit pointless if we're just shoving them all in the same place.
Like, part of the fun of that was everyone had their own art styles, everyone had their thing, and I feel like Gwen's art style was one of her strengths, her universe was one of her strengths, because say we bring her to this universe, like, that means she doesn't get her villains, that means she doesn't get her supporting cast, she has to just borrow off Peter's.
Yeah, and there was so much history in Spider-Gwen's supporting cast, like, the same way that Peter had people that don't like him for who he is as Peter Parker, and there's people that don't like Spider-Man. Gwen had a bunch of characters that, for example, Uncle Ben in Gwen's universe completely hated Spider-Gwen, but he totally loves Gwen. So a lot of that will be lost now that she's in this universe.
I guess we'll just have to have faith in what Marvel's doing with that and hope it turns out for the best, because who knows, it could be they could have a really good idea with it that we're just not seeing. But I think overall, Gwen Stacy as a character is one of those underappreciated in comics, because not only does she completely kick ass as Spider-Gwen and she's awesome, I also feel just regular old Gwen Stacy is a character that's really interesting, and if we're not going to bring her back, I think I could do with some flashback stories. Like, I don't see why you can't do like a 6-issue series set in Gwen and Peter's early days and just modern day update that a little bit, like Spider-Man Blue.
I was about to say, give me Spider-Man Blue 2.
Yeah, exactly, Blue 2 Wed. But no, I guess just closing up, I want everyone who hasn't really been into Spider-Gwen or doesn't really know the concept, maybe check out the first issue of her series or something. Look it up, it's on, you can get it on Comixology or in your local comic shop or whatever. I think it's something we both really recommend.
Absolutely, and I really hope you guys enjoy it.
Definitely. So again, if you guys want to see us do more comic discussions like this, if you want to see us do more character-based things, or just comic book stories in general, let us know in the comments, share this around, and we can make this a long-running series if people want.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
No, actually, you know what? You just ruined it. I don't want to more show ever again. No, but yes, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and I'm really looking forward to doing more of these with you, man. It's always just such a joy.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much.
And I've been a geek for fun, folks. I need to find like a dedicated outro. So just stick with this. I've been a geek for fun, folks. And most of all, I hope you all enjoyed, and take it easy.